And while you're lying on your back, notice, out of a scale of 1 to 10, how easy is it to lie on your back? So what's the degree of ease lying on your back? I can tell you from personal experience, there was a time in my life when lying on your back was one of the most difficult things you could ask me to do. Having experienced a nasty back injury, it definitely was not easy. And yet for most people, lying on your back, oh, what are you asking me that question for? Ridiculous question. Why are you asking me how easy this is? Okay, try a second thing. With your index finger, touch your nose. Come back. And again. So, how easy was that? And yet I can guarantee you, in all of your lives, at some time, you'd be half poking out your eye, your finger would be going into your ear. Those words wouldn't even make sense. And yet right now, it's easy. Please roll onto your right side. Bend both of your legs. And configure your legs as if you were sitting in a chair with your feet on the floor. So your knees are more or less in front of your hips, maybe a little bit lower. Your knees and thighs are at right angle to each other. And now lengthen out your right arm so that it's lying on the floor above your head, and your head is resting on the fleshy part of your upper arm. And have your left hand on the floor somewhere in front of you. And now with easy movements, start to slide your left hand away from the front of yourself, forward, and bring it back. And using this kind of movement, could you start to explore the floor in front of you, close by and far away, close by and then far away. And find out, to what places can you take your hand? What parts of the floor can you explore in front of you? And the only caveat is that however you explore, wherever you explore, that it feels easy to do. Just like touching your nose, and for most of you, just like lying on your back. Easy to do. So that is in the foreground of your attention in this lesson. Whatever you do, you're attending to ease. Now, notice, what do you consider to be in front? Where are you taking your hand? Is the floor in front of your knees, is that still the front of you? Is the floor ahead of your forehead? Is that in front of you? The floor in front of your abdomen? Is that in front? Where's front? What parts of the floor lie ahead of you in front? And is it possible to explore as much of the floor that's in front of you as you can, attending to ease? Now you can manipulate yourself, in other words, organize yourself so that you experience ease where a moment ago ease was not. So by changing your organization, something can become easier, less easy. The same thing with timing. The same thing with the way you orient the palm of your hand. Sometimes the palm is on the floor, oriented towards the floor, and sometimes the palm could be oriented towards the ceiling. Sometimes the palm could be oriented downwards, in other words, down, footwards relative to your own body, and sometimes the palm could be oriented upwards, in other words, headwards, in relationship to your own body. So all of this is in the background of your awareness, whilst in the foreground you have this idea of ease. That whatever you do is easy. Great. Stop. Rest a little bit. If you've come away from your side, return to lying on your right side in that same bodily configuration. And now with the pelvis, move your pelvis in such a way that you experience your left hip, that's the hip closest to the ceiling, moving a little forwards and a little backwards. And of course, in the foreground of your attention is this idea of ease, experiencing ease. That's what you want to create. So you move your pelvis so that you experience the hip going forwards and backwards easily. And to what extent do you move the hip and still experience ease? And then a subsequent question is, to what extent do you roll the pelvis and still know that you're lying on your side? Because the side is a big place. It's not this little narrow sort of tightrope that you're resting on. Lying on the side has quite malleable parameters. It's not just this one place. Great. Now stop rolling the pelvis, and could you please roll your head? And because your head is resting on your arm, your head might roll a little bit backwards off the back of your arm, and then it might roll a little forwards off the front of your arm, always in the foreground, attending to ease. And when you roll your head like that, is there any echo of the movement in your pelvis? Now stop rolling your head and roll your chest. Roll your chest forwards and backwards. And when you roll your chest like that, you'll feel that the pressure changes against the right-hand side of your chest that's resting on the floor. Can you track the changing places of contact, the changing places of pressure? And in the foreground of your attention, of course, is this idea of ease. And in the background of your awareness, notice when you roll your chest like this, does the pelvis roll? Does the head roll? Does the left leg move against the right leg? Okay. Let that be and rest. So, you know, awareness through movement lessons are like lasagna. Anybody here makes lasagna? Now you start to add one layer, and then you add another layer, and then another layer, and then another layer, and so on and so on. And then you have the raw ingredients, and then you put the whole thing in the oven, you bake it, and then you invite everybody and you eat it, right? That's lasagna. Now, just because you've had a rest and you've stopped doing one movement and then you start doing another, it's not like the layers are separate. Each layer makes up the next, makes up the next, makes up the next. So don't forget what's come before. Bring it in so that you make a complete dish. And don't say afterwards, like I've done many times, oh my God, I've forgotten the cheese. Please, return to lying on your side. Put the left hand on the floor in front of you and start to explore the floor forwards of yourself and find out how far in front of you can you explore. Knowing that you can roll the pelvis, knowing that you can roll the chest, knowing that you can roll the head, has that changed anything in your perception about where you can take the hand and what you could do to make it easier? So the next time that you take your hand as far forward as you can with ease, straighten the left elbow and let's introduce a constraint. Keep the elbow straight and start to explore the floor in front of you, downwards and upwards. And find out how big an arc can you make. When is it necessary to move the pelvis to make it feel easy? When is it necessary to move the chest to make it feel easy? The head? And given that I've talked about making layers, you could reference the previous lesson, that layer. How do you breathe to make this easy? Do you think of the abdomen? Do you think of the chest? So find out, how big a sweep can you make along the floor with that left arm, with the elbow straight? And at what point do you start to realize, oh, now my hand is no longer in front, now it's above? And to continue the exploration into ease, at what moment do you need to change the orientation of your palm? Is it just as easy to have the palm on the floor when it's down near your knees and legs as it is to have the palm on the floor just as the hand is approaching that place that turns into above your head? Great. Leave it, rest a little bit. When you scan for ease, if that is the foreground of your attention, when you scan for it, what is it that you're picking up on? What is it that you go sensing for when you're scanning for ease? Return to lying on your right side. Have the legs in that same configuration. But this time, place your left hand on the floor somewhere above your head. And in this position of the hand, start to explore the floor above yourself. So any part of the floor that you consider to be above your head, explore that. And then there's above your head and a little forward and above your head and a little backwards. Sometimes it's possible to constrain our explorations without us even knowing it because we have a particular idea of what directions are and what areas are. So if you have a very narrow concept of what above the head is, of course, your explorations will be quite minimal compared to your neighbour who has got quite broad understanding of what above is, and their explorations are quite wide and expansive. So then it's not a matter of manipulation, it's a matter of how your concepts are constraining what you do. Liberate your concepts. Oh, other possibilities arise. How far above your head are you exploring the floor? And is there something that you could do in yourself to go a little further with equal ease. Perhaps some way that you configure your head, some way that you move your chest. Great. Pause a moment. Have your hand on the floor somewhere in front, just for your own balance. Now, resting on your right side, bring your attention to your pelvis and start to move your pelvis in such a way that the left hip moves towards the head and then away from the head. And over time, make that easier and easier and easier, allowing your spine to bend, allowing the left leg to move relative to the right leg. Allowing your spine to be pushed and pulled by the movement of the pelvis. The chest to be rocked on the floor. And if you pay attention to your left shoulder, the shoulder that's closest to the ceiling, what happens when you move the hips like you're moving them? When does the left shoulder tend to get closer to the left ear? When the hip is going towards the head or away from the head? And is this something that could be useful for exploring the floor with your hand above your head? This particular pattern, this particular organization of movement. So please try it out. Put the hand on the floor above your head and see whether moving the pelvis in a particular way would allow you to explore the floor further afield, but with equal ease. Great. Please leave that, lie on your back and rest. Notice if these asymmetrical movements that you've been doing have an effect on the way you experience yourself lying on the floor. If we were attentive all of the time, we'd notice that with every movement there's this kind of an afterglow of sensations. That sensations persist after we've done something. But generally speaking, we don't notice. So one of the opportunities that you offer people is to actually get to sense, when I do this, I tend to experience that. That with every movement, I get a different sense of myself afterwards, that there's an after effect. And usually in everyday life, unless that after effect is really, really radical and big, people don't notice. So then they start to believe that they have to do big things to make big differences. When in actual fact, you know already through your practice that that's not necessarily the case. Please roll onto your right side again. And now put your left hand on the floor behind you so that you distinctly know that some part of your left hand is in contact with the floor behind. Doesn't matter what part. And now, with the hand, start to explore the floor behind you. Now, some people have put their hands behind their backs, and some people have put their hands behind their heads, and some people have put their hands behind their bottoms. There's lots of different places that equal behind you, right? Because all of those people are right. It's all behind. So how close to you can you explore, and then how far away from you can you explore the floor behind you? And the only constraint is that you remain more or less lying on your side. And the primary attention, what you're most interested in the foreground, is the ease. It's like ease, in this instance, is your guiding star, your guiding compass. Everything is navigated via that. So what is your concept of lying on the side? How far backwards can you roll your pelvis and still know that you're lying on your side and you're not lying on your back? So yes, our flesh is not the only thing that limits us. Oh, my tendons aren't big enough. I don't have enough strength. Sometimes it's the very ideas that we have about what we're doing that are the source of the limitation. If you expand that idea, what happens to your ability? And does it make a difference if you slipped that left foot onto the floor behind the right leg? So rather than resting the left foot on the right, you just rested the left foot on the floor and let the knee do whatever it needs to do. Ah. Does that produce an ah sound? That's easier. And does that sound equated with ease? Yes. Ah. So maybe feeling ease has something to do with breathing, or else you wouldn't make the ah. And maybe having a smile on your face has something to do with ease, because then I wouldn't see some of your mouths getting wider across the borders, right? From corner to corner. Yeah. Now, place the palm of your right hand on the floor in front of you with the elbows straight. So the constraint is the elbows straight and you stay lying on your side. Now imagine that underneath you is the center of the clock. Did I say right? If I did, that was a mistake. The left hand, sorry. Oops. Imagine that under your right shoulder you have the center of a clock, and in front of you is 12, And behind you is 6 o'clock. Three o'clock is above your head. 9 o'clock is in the direction of your pelvis. Could you please start to take your hand around the circumference of that clock? And notice, when do you need to change the orientation of the palm? In other words, when does the arm need to flip? How can you roll yourself a little forwards, a little backwards, to assist this circular sweep of the arm? When does the pelvis really specifically need to get involved so that the arm can go all the way up to 12? And then when does the hand need to leave the floor? In other words, move away from gravity to complete the circle, to go over the hip. And for some of you, this will become a lot easier if you say to yourself, I know that there was a constraint, that the elbow was straight, but for me, right now, to make this easy, I will break that constraint. And I know that I will be breaking it until it gets easier. When it gets easier, I'll come back to it. So sometimes constraints are really tough, really have to be maintained, and sometimes there are what you would call softer constraints. This is a softer constraint. Oh, you can touch somebody too. That's nice. That's a nice moment when you touch somebody. Sometimes rooms are too big. They don't give you that opportunity to make contact. Now notice, in which direction are you circling your arm? Are you going clockwise or anti-clockwise? And was that an intentional choice or just because I described it in a particular way? Now, investigate. Does it make a difference if you go the other way around? And it very well, for some of you, might. Going in our opposite direction to what you chose to do might create less ease. And then the investigation is, well, how come? What is it that I do going this way around that makes it difficult compared to what I do when I go the other way around? And then you can become preoccupied with finding out so that the ease of your motion can continue to grow and develop. The next time that you're making a circle, please use this particular pattern of movement to roll yourself onto your back. So it is vitally important that you remember that in these kinds of lessons that you're doing, you are using your attention to create something that feels easier for you, something that you feel eventually completely satisfied with. And like Feldenkrais describes it in the Awareness Through Movement book, in that first preface and the introduction, this is self-education, self-directed learning. So what better person is there than you to know what you experience inside yourself? There's no one more authoritative than you. And if you know how to explore skillfully and track your own experience, it's a winning combination. Please, one more time, return to lying on your right side. Bend both of your legs as if you were sitting in a chair. Place your left hand on the floor somewhere in front of you. And begin to circle your arm around yourself. And start to smooth out the movement so that the evenness of ease is distributed all around. So let's go from making lasagna to making a cake. So you know, after you've baked a cake and you're putting on the icing, you don't want some of the icing to be really thick in some places and then hardly any icing anywhere else. You want the icing to be nicely layered, the same thickness all the way around. Because then not only does it look great, but everybody gets a good taste of the same amount of icing. Yum, yum. If you like sugar, of course. So the same thing here. How do you start to spread the experience of ease all the way around? Now, one way to do it is as you're making a circle, at that moment that you start to experience, oh, not so easy, change direction and go the other way around until you get to more or less that place that you anticipate where it's not going to be easy. And notice, is it easier to approach it from that side? And then just go back and forth, one way and the other way, until something just changes. Because some part of you has found a way to coordinate that allows equal ease. So rather than pushing through it and going, okay, I'll just skip that part and continue, no, you just go to the border and then you change direction, you go to the border and you change direction and you keep monitoring, ah yes, now I'm rolling the chest and this is how I'm coordinating the head and, oh, I flipped the hand differently. The timing of the flipping of the arm is different this way around. And you realize something and then you can use it. So you just keep on attending what's different one way, what's different the other. And by attending and noting, you come up with a solution. That's real self-directed learning. Now, for some of you, it might be a question of speed. Some of you just might be faster movers, that somehow ease is associated with fastness. So maybe you need to change your speed. And I also acknowledge that for some of you, you might really love to move very, very slowly, so that one rotation of the arm, it's not like a minute, it's almost like an hour. Yeah. So, varying your timing to find what works well for you. It's another method. And for some of you, accelerating and decelerating might work. At a certain part in the circle, you could be going slowly, and then as you approach another part of the circle, you go a little faster, you accelerate, and then, oh, you decelerate again. So varying the speed for some of you might work, to spread the ease all the way around. So there's nothing sacrosanct at this moment, in this lesson, about the constancy of speed. Great. Use this pattern of movement to roll onto your back. And lie on your back with your legs extended, your arms on the floor. And just a word of advice. If ever you're so engrossed in an exploration in what you're doing and you really don't want to stop, don't feel like you have to. Yeah? Maintain your curiosity, maintain your interest, keep going until you've had enough, and then stop. Notice how you experience yourself on the floor now. Is there something different that you notice about yourself compared to what you noticed at the beginning? Roll to the one side, come up to standing. Notice how you experience yourself standing. After you've adjusted all your clothes. It's bothering how they shift around, isn't it? It gives you a different perception of your body. Biased, awful, terrible stuff. I have to adjust those clothes. Why? Now, that arm that you were just circling on the floor, could you make a circle with it again? In the same way that you did on the floor, but now there's no floor to touch. And now that you're in a different relationship to the field of gravity, notice what it's like. And now that you don't have the floor pressing up against you, against your right side, feel what it's like. It's the same arm you're circling. Same left arm. And one thing that becomes very much more easy, well, I won't say that. Let me say it a different way. One thing that becomes more possible when you're up and standing like this is that you can track your hand as it moves through space with your eyes. And so the only thing that you need to know is your hand still going around the clock? 12, 6, 9, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There we go. I'm seeing shapes that I didn't see on the floor. Interesting. Yeah. So if you were to lie down on the floor again, which right now you're not, would you have added information having done this standing up? Chances are yes. So doing things in multiple different positions also is informative. All right, let that be. Have a short break and we'll come back in a moment. All right, so let's say, it's 22, just before 10 to.